let's get started. My name is David Braun, and I'm legal counsel for the Texas Real Estate Advocacy and Defense Coalition, TREAD Coalition. And I have a very small role to play in today's proceedings, just kind of organizing the chaos and keeping people that you need to hear from up here. I will say that the TREAD Coalition is a coalition of landowners across the state that was formed in 2018 to advocate for the rights of landowners and small communities on issues just like this that we're here today to talk about. TREAD is very pleased to be working with the City of Kyle and Hays County to announce the filing of a lawsuit against Kinder Morgan and the Railroad Commission, which is never a happy time, but we feel very strongly that the process in use now for choosing a route for the Kinder Morgan Permian highway pipeline is not balanced, is unilateral, and the process needs to be improved. The point of the lawsuit is to ask the Railroad Commission to establish rules and supervision of the process so that landowners and communities like Kyle and Hays County are part of the process before decisions are made that affect their economy, their environment, and their citizens. So with that, I want to invite all of the landowners that are affected here that came today. There's a small number. There are more than 1,000 landowners whose land is being taken. I'd like to invite those that are here to come up and stand behind the podium and be part of the press conference. And then I'd also like to invite all the elected officials who are here from Kyle and Hays County. And I think I saw Representative Aaron Sweener come in also. So seriously, folks, come on up. It's your press conference. Are supporting landowners near their land, impacted landowners. As I said, this is an occasion to recognize the entire community that's affected by the decisions of Kinder Morgan and the Railroad Commission. And we're going to have speakers from the city, the county, and the landowners, but let me be sure and specifically recognize, and please help me raise your hand and step forward if I call your name, and tell me if I forgot someone. I want to ask Representative Aaron Zwiener from this district. Thank you, Aaron. Mayor Travis Mitchell, Council Member Alex Villalobos, Daphne Tenorio, Tracy Shield, thank you, and Rick Coach. Thank you. From Hays County, we have Judge Ruben Becerra, Commissioner Walt Smith, and Commissioner Mark Smith.
Mark
Jones, sorry. I wrote them down at the same time, sorry. Mark Jones. In addition to, did I forget any elected officials? Amazing. I also want to recognize, not individually, but we have landowners here from 4 of the 17 counties that are affected by the project, and we appreciate all of you coming forward, and many of you have been involved in this discussion from the very beginning, and thank you all. The important thing is for me to get Kyle Mayer, Travis Mitchell up here to speak.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming out. It's 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. I have remarked on more than one occasion that it is a rare event that people from all over the political spectrum in Hays County come together in unison, and this is one of those examples. Kinder Morgan has kicked over a hornet's nest, as they say, or an ant pile, and we're very honored to be here. This is a decision that the city of Kyle in particular has made not without a great deal of foresight. And so I want to say thank you to a few folks that are here. First off, thank you to, as far as the city council is concerned, Councilmember Daphne Tenorio and Tracy Scheel have been very vocal and very active and involved in this process, going to meetings far and wide to raise awareness about the process that is being violated in Kinder Morgan. And so thank you to them. I'd like to thank Commissioners Walt Smith and Lon Schell, who were designated by Hays County to represent the county interest in this matter. Their leadership and their consideration does not go without notice. For myself, I always try to look to the county for wisdom and leadership, and so thank you as well. And I'd like to thank Representative Aaron Zwiener, who has spent the last weeks and months working diligently at the Capitol to try to raise awareness about some of the issues that are affecting the city of Kyle. And so for your leadership, thank you for that. We know there are a host of bills that we are anxiously waiting to see passed with regards to this issue. Does anybody know how many miles of pipeline that Kinder Morgan is proposing to take using the power of eminent domain? 420 something, 23 or something along those lines. Do you know how many pages of application they had to file in order to receive the awesome power of eminent domain? That's it. There's one check on this box. So we have got to do better. And I'm going to borrow Commissioner Schell's wording, and he has said multiple times that his fight is not with the Railroad Commission, that he believes in the power of eminent domain as a last resort, and that the process should be incredibly transparent, and that the community should have a say. Because as an elected official, when the community disagrees with me, they show up and let me know, and they have many ways to remedy their disagreements with me. Kinder Morgan has 420 miles of power to take people's land, and they are not held accountable by anyone in this room. And we are asking the Railroad Commission to help establish a process that is fair, that is transparent, that allows for the community to have a say in how pipelines are routed, and to consider environmental impacts, economic impacts, and that requires Kinder Morgan to be front and center and honest and transparent in the way that they acquire land. And so thank you to the folks that are here for helping us to step forward, to do more than just passing a resolution. We're very grateful for the city of San Marcos, the city of Buda, Hays CISD, Hays County, and about half a dozen other jurisdictions just within a few miles of here joining together to pass resolutions of opposition. That is an important first step. This is the important next step. This is us taking the fight to Kinder Morgan and putting our reputations on the line to call on the Railroad Commission to help us in this process. So thank you very much. With that, I'd like to bring up Commissioner Walt Smith.
Thank you. A slight delay on bringing Walt up. I noticed Commissioner Debbie Inglesby came in. Thank you for being here, for Hays County Commissioner Debbie Inglesby. And for the members of the press, I think there's a written statement from Representative Zwiener that's now available. It might not have been available when you came in, so I'll make sure that that's over on the table, but an important statement from Representative Zwiener. Commissioner Walt Smith.
Thank you, David. I just want to first off introduce myself, Commissioner Walt Smith. I represent from the Blanco County line all the way through hometown Kyle. It's a big precinct, but there's one thing it's very diverse. And I would say that our Commissioner's Court is just about as diverse as that precinct is, actually more so. But we as a court are very unified when it comes to certain things. And this is an issue that has truly unified our court. Kinder Morgan itself could not have picked a path across our county where it literally cut through 4 commissioners' precincts. How many commissioners do we have? 4. And a county judge who represents all those areas. And we as a group stood unified in passing a resolution earlier about 2 months ago, the first resolution in opposition to the pipeline. And I know that y'all have seen that, but this isn't a decision that comes lightly. The action that's taken today. We support our private property owners and our residents, and we truly find it, or I truly find it unnerving that the long, arduous, and intricate process that we take as elected officials and as a governmental body to use the power of eminent domain is one that not only do we take seriously, but it's one that we treasure to try not to take, if at all possible. There's a process, as Mayor Mitchell said, for direct public comment, for direct public input, for our community to be a part of it. That's not the case here. Not without any type of public input whatsoever, you have a condemnation process that literally targets those people and those residents who have tried their hardest to, of their own volition, try to conserve the resources and the attributes that make our area special. Those larger pieces of property are a whole lot easier to drop a pipeline across than small ones, and it's really disheartening to us to see that. The Hays County Commissioners, as I said, stood unified in their support of this measure, appointing Commissioner Schell and myself to do the due diligence before we decided to move forward with this lawsuit. And in doing that, conducting that due diligence, we spoke with members of the legislature. We spoke with industry groups from all spectrums, Farm Bureau, Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers, other communities that have been impacted by this, other counties out there that have been impacted by this as well. Those organizations, they all have one thing in common. They all represent a certain constituency, whether those are landowners, whether those are people who happen to reside in an apartment complex that this pipeline would run next to, whether they're community leaders in places throughout our county. But they all represent somebody. The one thing that is very disheartening to me is whenever I look at this scenario, Kinder Morgan doesn't have anybody that they represent here. We all have to answer to someone. And we think, or I think that the lawsuit that we've contemplated and that will be filed today is our attempt to have them answer to somebody in Hays County. That's the measure that we've taken. That's the reason we've done this. It's the reasoning behind this decision. And again, the decision to do this was not made lightly. The suit filed today simply asked for the state to step up and take the power that's been granted to them by the legislature and create a process by which we have a voice. Right now, we don't. And it's unfortunate that we've had to go through a judiciary or a judicial means to move in this direction to try to have that voice. But we, as a commissioner's court, felt that it was necessary, and I'm proud that we are unified as we stand up here today, all of us. And on behalf of Commissioner Schell, who was unable to make it today, let me tell you, he stands with us just as strongly, if not more so. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
Take just a second and get Lana Nance to the podium. Lana will be speaking as one of the affected landowners and a plaintiff in the lawsuit. Lana and her husband represent the Heritage Ranch here and Kyle, the Nance Ranch.
Scott and I, my husband, are landowners in Hays County, a little west of town here. And we are plaintiffs in the lawsuit against Kinder Morgan and the Texas Railroad Commission. Our land is very special to us. It's been in the Nance family since 1838. That's 2 years after the Texas Revolution, I guess you'd call it. And we have had plans for this to benefit our children and grandchildren. And not only does Kinder Morgan not need our permission to take our land and destroy many years of plans, they don't have to justify or explain to their decision to any higher authority right now. And we are happy to join the others that are, as we fight this pipeline through this lawsuit. We hope that the result will be the formation of a way to participate in the progress. We appreciate you being here. You're a help too. Thank you.
We're going to open up now for questions and from any of the speakers, plus we also have the two attorneys that drafted the lawsuit here to answer technical questions. And after a few minutes of questions, then landowners, elected officials, and small business owners are available for interviews after the question answer period. So questions? Yes, ma'am.
Has a suit of this type been brought involving the Railroad Commission previously?
This is Clark Richards from the law firm of Richards, Rodriguez, and Skeeth, one of the authors of the suit.
Thank you, Clark Richards. I'm happy to be representing the city of Kyle and Harris County and the Nances and the other plaintiffs in the case. This particular challenge. Whose phone is ringing? This guy's. Won't cause a problem at all. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I apologize for that. Oh, no problem. The simple answer to your question is this particular challenge has not been brought before. We are asserting that the Texas Constitution requires that this grant of eminent domain power to private pipelines requires some standards for how they exercise that, and those standards have not been set, and therefore we think the courts will require the Railroad Commission to adopt standards that create transparency and openness.
Mr. Richardson, if you hang on there, pipelines have been running through Texas for decades. Bill, why has not a challenge like this been done before? Why this one, and why is this one different from any other type of challenge whenever we've had? I remember the Longhorn pipeline. That was a very controversial pipeline that went through the Austin area. How is that different from this that you're trying to do?
I'm going to invite my colleague Renee Hicks to talk about the Longhorn pipeline since that was his case. However, I think one short answer is, for the most part, pipeline companies can divide and conquer landowners, and each landowner has to make a decision by themselves as to whether or not to accept an offer or to hire an attorney and fight, and that's a very difficult cost-benefit analysis. In this case, a large coalition of landowners have joined together and have decided to fight collectively, and that's an unusual level of participation given the sensitivities of the land that's affected by this pipeline. But let Renee talk briefly about the Longhorn pipeline.
I should have asked, could each reporter identify yourself and who you represent?
Rudy Kosky, Fox 7 also.
And if we could go back. Thank you.
Hi, Renee Hicks. I'm one of the lawyers for the plaintiffs. The short answer to your question about why not before is that nobody's messed with Hays County and its residents and its elected officials this way before with such a massive pipeline that I'm aware of. That's the short answer. You can see they're concerned about it, and they're concerned about it because they care about their land, their water, their private property rights. The difference between this and Longhorn Pipeline was built in the early 1950s. It had been in the ground for a half century when they decided to convert it to a different kind of pipeline and repurpose it. And so that's the big difference. This is a brand new pipeline where they're essentially, I think, trying to establish not only their pipeline through here, but establish this as a corridor for pipelines from West Texas and the Permian Basin to the east coast of Texas. And so I think that's the big difference. In the Longhorn Pipeline case, let me just mention, you may recall, I do very well, because I was there in the middle of it 20 or so years ago. They stirred up a hornet's nest then, too. There was the largest turnout ever publicly of citizens opposed to a pipeline and for an environmental cause in connection with the Longhorn Pipeline. The Longhorn Pipeline, it was already in the ground, so it was hard to say dig it up and get it out of here. But they had to put $60 to $100 million worth of improvements into that pipeline because they messed, again, with Central Texas and its water and its environment. Now they're messing with Hays County, and I think Hays County residents are saying, just don't build it, or at least you should never be able to do these things to us without giving us some say at the front end instead of sticking us at the back end of everything.
Speaking of the Longhorn Pipeline, can we speak about the... Could you identify yourself? My name is Louis Fonspice. I do independent media. The Longhorn Pipeline, since we're on it, since Mr. Rudy Costco brought it up, can we talk about the leaks and the damages, earth crimes that the Longhorn Pipeline did, including the one in Bastrop just recently?
No, I don't think this is the appropriate time for it. We're here about the Hays County situation and the Permian Pipeline.
Okay, we were talking about the Longhorn Pipeline. I figured we'd bring up the crimes that it's committed on the earth, but I guess not.
Mr. Richards, in regards to and what Mr. Hicks was saying, that this is all about, we don't want to be on the back end, we want to be on the front end. The policies and procedures that the commission has in place right now, if you can't clarify for us, in my understanding that eminent domain, you have a court hearing, things like that, if the county wanted to build a highway or the schools on that, property owners are brought in, full-blown hearing. We don't get that now in regards to the pipeline.
A simple comparison would be with an electric utility that wanted to build a transmission line. If they want to build a transmission line, they would propose a route to the Public Utilities Commission. The Public Utilities Commission would hold hearings. All the landowners and other affected individuals and entities would be given an opportunity to come and speak at that hearing and discuss alternative routes, opposition to the proposed route. And only after those public hearings would the Public Utility Commission issue a certificate of convenience and necessity that permitted the electric utility to then exercise eminent domain. None of that happens in this instance with a private pipeline. The Railroad Commission merely approves the T4 permit application without any public comment, and that then commences the eminent domain proceedings, and so there's no public opportunity to discuss the route and its effect on the land and the people.
All lawsuits have plaintiffs. Plaintiffs want something. What exactly is this lawsuit seeking?
We are asking for the court to enter a declaration that the Railroad Commission's current process of approving pipeline applications is unconstitutional, and we are asking the court to enjoin Kinder Morgan from proceeding with eminent domain proceedings until a constitutionally permissible form of application process exists and has been applied to this pipeline.
No, nothing financial.
No, we're not seeking any money.
How can you help other communities follow the lead of pursuing lawsuits against Kinder Morgan? Give us a quick update on how they can go and be part of this process. Can they join this lawsuit, or how can they proceed with their own lawsuit?
We would welcome the involvement of any other community that's affected or landowners that are affected. We probably do not need any more plaintiffs. That just makes the litigation expensive and time-consuming. And there are many ways that people can help, though, and we welcomed working with them. We, TRED, and all the community welcomes involvement. Yes, ma'am.
Get in touch with you to follow up.
Just a minute.
Cameron KXAM. I just saw that President Trump has signed, just making it that much easier for pipelines and so forth to have access to eminent domain. And
Anybody
is
want
it
to take
gonna
that?
get any tougher for you guys to get anywhere with this?
You know, we welcome President Trump's statement and executive orders. We have we've issued some observations about them, a position on them. It really doesn't touch on this issue at all. The need for infrastructure in the pipeline industry is unquestioned, and that's what the president's executive order is about. But there's actually many parts of his executive order that call for a fair process and involvement of the community. So we think that President Trump's executive orders support our position.
Let me just add to that, if I may, briefly. I agree completely with what David said. President Trump's principally talking about federal jurisdiction over pipelines and essentially interstate pipelines. We're happy with, not happy with all the results, but we're happy with the process that's set up for interstate pipelines because they do exactly what we're saying the Texas Railroad Commission should do here for intrastate pipelines. They have a public hearing in advance. They evaluate environmental and community concerns. They evaluate what the pipeline thinks too. They have hearings, so you know in advance, and then you get a certificate of public convenience and necessity, and then the pipeline has the right to start exercising the power of eminent domain. We have it backwards here. We have nothing, really nothing for the citizens.
So has Kinder done so far as to start trenching and involving themselves on people's properties already?
No. As far as we know, there are over 1,000 affected landowners, so we can't speak for every last one of them. But as far as we know, Kinder Morgan is in the process of doing private surveys of the land and the route, and they're talking to individual landowners about acquiring their land. So about a week ago, the first suits in condemnation, the first lawsuits against landowners started being filed. So we're midway in that process towards Kinder Morgan exercising the power of eminent domain. And this gentleman's question about how do other people get in touch, I think in our press release there are contacts for a number of the officials and the entire plaintiff group here, so there's contact information in our handouts. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
How many landowners are being affected in Hays County?
I believe, does anybody have that number off the top of their head?
The thing I would say is at this point, we can't give you an exact number because of the value or the placement of the pipeline itself. We don't know that. Again, because there is no public comment, there is no public disclosure, we don't know where the exact path of the pipeline is. The path of least resistance on the pipeline's part is the path of fewer landowners. However, that creates a massive impact on our community.
It's going to take 2 billion gallons of water to hydrostatically test this pipeline. Where do they intend to get the water in through your community?
We don't have a technical expert here today, but if you'll contact us, we'll get you an answer to engineering and scientific questions.
And now the board members, the man camps that come through the community that bring, as you know, a murder, rape, drugs, abuse. Yes. Are you surprised? Because it does. It does.
Comment.
Okay. Because where do they intend to be located throughout your community? And have you discussed that with your community as the pipeline goes through your community? Man camps.
I don't think that's a question we've contemplated.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is Lale, State Street Press. What court is this going to be filed in? And just maybe just to clarify, this will be filed, I guess, today or the next few days, or how does that get filed? Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, the lawsuit was filed this morning in Travis County State District Court. That venue is required because the Railroad Commission is a party, and so it's a state court proceeding, which is one reason why the issue of the president's announcement shouldn't have that much effect since we're under state law and state proceedings.
One of the
Well, we are consolidating all of our efforts for this particular argument in this one lawsuit. Whether other groups or plaintiffs intend other proceedings, we don't know. However, one of the things that will occur if condemnation proceedings take place is that each of the landowners affected will have to be a defendant in a lawsuit in their own county, and so that would obviously result in potentially a variety of lawsuits being filed.
And I can add a little bit to that for TRED. TRED's working with landowner groups locally and nationally on this issue, and we do expect a number of other lawsuits to be filed in the next few weeks and months. And some will be by local communities and some will be by national groups. And some are tightly coordinated with TRED and some are completely independent. And so this is an issue that has brought a lot of people from both parts of the political spectrum, landowners, city dwellers, business people, developers, conservationists have all come together because this is so obviously not the right policy for the state of Texas. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sam Melodick. I'm from Gillespie County, Fredericksburg. And first of all,
Are you with a media
No, I'm
organization?
not. Am I allowed to ask a question?
We're going to allow some individual interviews afterwards,
Okay.
but this is a question answer time for the press.
And you already, I'm Delia with KUT. You probably already answered this at the beginning, but how long is this process expected to?
The process of the pipeline?
Yeah, this whole litigation.
Well, the litigation process, I need to get Clark and Renee up here.
For this particular lawsuit, we're going to ask the court to schedule a temporary injunction hearing at the earliest opportunity, and that'll be the first sort of test of the arguments of both sides. I can't give you a specific time on that. As I said, we filed the lawsuit this morning and have not yet heard back from the court as to when the scheduled, the hearing will be scheduled.
As individuals trying to protect your environment or your community, I asked the mayor and his constituents, will you be watching, and through our research, will you be watching the law enforcement who usually takes private contracts? Will you be against that? Will you be monitoring that? The police enforcement throughout communities are known to take private contracts and gain to protect the pipeline workers and the pipelines and go against the community. What will you be doing as individuals, the leaders of your community, on that base?
I think we'll have a focus and interest in all manner as it relates to Kinder Morgan. So we will be doing our very best to monitor the situation and make sure that the citizens are being represented.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm John Augustine. I'm an independent photojournalist. I'm just wondering if you could just give us a rundown of the process from the beginning to this lawsuit. Just what certain events that have occurred along the way, and when and how did it become apparent that a lawsuit is necessary?
Well, landowners began receiving letters from Kinder Morgan that the route was set and that they needed to survey for the details of each landowner's property back in early October of 2018. There may have been earlier. That's the first we heard about here in Hays County. Immediately, people at representing landowners, I'll let the city and county talk, conversations started with Kinder Morgan, and by late October there was discussions that continued until this Saturday, where efforts were made to settle with Kinder Morgan and to slow down and take a different process. Those were not successful. I think that Walt Smith already said there were efforts to contact the Railroad Commission, the industry trade groups, members of the legislature. Every possible avenue was taken to avoid a lawsuit and just ask for a more reasonable process. We were not successful. You want to add anything? Okay.
Were there certain events that happened or that did not happen in the last 4 or 5 months that aggravated this environment to the point where a lawsuit is necessary?
You know, I would encourage every member of the media to stay for a few minutes and interview some of these people. There are so many incidents that we could not even begin to catalog them, where landowners feel ignored, disrespected, mistreated, actually treated like they have no right to their own land. I wouldn't begin to try to speak for them, but they have many stories that you should hear.
My name is Max Anderson. I'm with B&M Productions. So you were talking about the T4 form earlier, the one-page form that you can check box and get approval from the Railroad Commission. With this lawsuit, is there going to be a chance to change the process and make it have more input?
Thank you. That's precisely what the lawsuit is seeking, is the courts to order that a process more similar to what happens in the Public Utility Commission also take place for the purposes of pipeline eminent domain proceedings. So that's exactly what we're looking for.
And just to follow up, you know, with interstate pipelines, there's generally like an environmental assessment. Intrastate doesn't necessarily have to have the same strict type of, you know, processes in the beginning to establish what the environmental impact will be. Do you think this will impact that at all?
I'm not a specialist in environmental law, so I'll try not to stray into areas where I'm not you know, an expert, but there are different processes for environmental impact investigation in the federal level. We are not taking any arguments in this lawsuit regarding the environmental issues other than to really point out that there are environmental issues, and those may be issues that should be considered in the public hearing process that we're seeking.
Okay. Thank everyone very much. We'll be here to answer questions, take interviews, but I particularly want to thank the landowners, the plaintiffs, and the city and county who've come together to stand strong to protect their community. Thank you.